Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Rumcast. This is the one and the only podcast that talks all things rum related with the people who love and shape it. And wait, I guess that's not entirely true. There are other rum podcasts out there that talk rum. And I think more recently, actually, Will, which is great. But I guess I would say this is the one and only rum podcast with the finely tuned 5-year-old aged blend of co-hosts named John Gullah
nice
and
recovery.
Will Hookinga.
That was good.
And
Very
of course,
smooth.
yes, today's episode, we are interviewing Mr. Oliver Chilton, head blender from Elixir Spirits and the Black Tot brand. But Will, before we get to that interview, I did have something I wanted to ask you about, which is timely.
You did? Okay, ask away.
Are you familiar with the Ascot Awards?
Oh, those Fred Minnick's awards?
Yes.
The bourbon guy?
Yes, I guess in honor of him wearing his ascot all the time.
Yeah.
That's where it is. Yeah. So, Fred Minnick is big in the bourbon world and the whiskey world, right? And I know he loves rum as well, and it's a blind spirits judging competition he does every year. I think this is the 5th year of those awards, and that panel is judged by, serious experts engaged in spirit media, all of that, and, of course, including Fred himself. So this week, they started releasing the winners of the best in category and best in show, and they released the winners for the best rum and the best in show non-whiskey, and posted a short video of a 7-person panel, which included one Martin Kate. And I wanted to discuss that quickly.
I didn't even know they did rum as part of those awards, so that's a surprise to me.
So I don't know if that goes back all 5 years or not, but I do know, Fred wrote the Rum Curious book, I think.
Right, yeah.
So, he's involved with rum. Yeah.
I read Rum Curious way back when, probably before we started the podcast, I think. But yeah. Also, quick question for you before you jump into these results. If we had an awards thing, which I feel like will never happen, but if we did, what would our ascot be? What's our object that's closely associated with the podcast? Maybe it's not an object.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of only things that are like silly, like microphones and headphones. That's not going to work. It's not descriptive enough.
If they were your personal awards, we could just call them the John Gullah Fantastic Awards.
The Fantastic Awards works, yes. We could have a new hotness category.
I feel like Fantastic works because you use that word a lot, and it's become kind of your thing, and also because you like fantasy as well. So it's, it all kind of works together.
I think it does. And what would be yours? Yours would be...
I don't know.
You have one phrase you like to use, which is very descriptive, and it's includes an expletive.
What is it?
This is really fucking good.
Do I say that a lot?
That's your go-to. Yeah, that's your go-to with it.
The RFGs?
Yep, the RFG Awards. I love it.
Okay, that's it.
I think we should roll with those.
All right. Okay, please continue.
I want to ask you, first of all, do you want to venture a guess as to what rum won the best here? Obviously, they didn't go through every rum, so...
I would just guess a Foursquare rum, knowing the...
It's a good guess.
The people picking it, yeah.
Yeah, it is a very good guess. It's not.
Okay.
It's a Rolling Fork 16-year...
Okay, that would have been my second guess.
Oh, was it? So this is their 16-year 10-cane Trinidad single cask release. It was aged in ex-wheated bourbon casks, and then I think it's a secondary maturation of ex-cognac. So that's a pot still cane juice release. It retails for $200. But more importantly, and what I wanted to talk about with you is not necessarily that it won that award, but that it also won the best in show non-whiskey over mezcals, gins, and other non-whiskey products that they were judging best in their category.
That is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so they posted a short video online, and when it took that, it was a vote of 5 out of the 7 judges, and Martin Kate was visibly excited as he could see it winning, and he said, quote, "I'm always excited when rum does well in competition. I love seeing the category get more and more respect, and that more brands are bringing characterful, interesting rums to market," which was, I thought, a good, kind of bring back to there. And Fred also followed up saying, quote, "This was pretty special," is what he said. So just nice to hear that rum's getting its due in this award format.
Sure. Do you recall the year on that tin cane release?
2008.
2008. Okay, interesting. Because I asked just because until very recently, John, every tin cane rum, and I think you may have mentioned this just now, but tin cane, the other closed distillery from Trinidad, they had their own kind of tin can brand that was really more sort of like mid-market rums, not like cask strength, single cask type releases.
I still have it.
Yeah. And so in the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years or so, there have been a lot more of these old tin can casks that were sold off to various brokers and third parties being released through independent bottlers. And I tried probably 3 or 4 of them over the years. And every time I had one, I just was really left wanting a lot more. To me, it was the example of like the closed quote unquote legendary rum distillery, where it was really just more story than actual quality. Like they weren't bad. They just, for the prices, I never had one that I really thought did much for me. But that changed recently when I tried the newest tin cane release from Holmes Key. Yeah, and I think you and I might be doing a bonus episode kind of tasting through some of those samples, so I don't want to say too much here, but I'll just say that one changed my mind. It really impressed me and struck me as being distinctly different from the past ones I had in terms of quality. So I think if I hadn't had that rum yet, right now I would be kind of like incredulous at that being the rum that I impressed these mostly whiskey people so much. But now I'm open to the possibility that maybe it just was that good.
I think I was on top of it sooner than you were, because Holmes Key's done a couple of different annual releases of that, and I have at least one of their bottlings that
I'd had the previous ones from them too, so it's not even just a case of like, oh, I finally found a bottler that's picking good ones. It's more like, no, I'd had the Holmes Key ones in the past, and they just never really did anything for me. So this one turned me around.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, I did want to mention also about we've talked about a general kind of dislike for awards in some ways, because they're I guess inherently flawed, right? It's really hard to do that and not have some sort of flaws in the process, even if you try really hard. That said, I don't know all the entries in this, and certainly don't want to tarnish this win with Rolling Fork or for the rum category as a whole. I actually think Rolling Fork does a really good job, and this is probably really well deserved from what I'm hearing. I also kind of wanted to mention and talk it out with you and see if you felt the same. I know Rolling Fork, first of all, it operates kind of in Fred's backyard, right? I know they have ties to bourbon. And I also saw that one of the rums that was a finalist was a Myers signature cask collection that was finished and heavily marketed in Thomas Handy Sazerac rye casks. And so, the thought there was like, well, I know this is probably, whiskey lovers are going to know that, and they're going to kind of recognize it and how that may affect. I mean, this is a blind judging, by the way, so keep in mind that this is done blindly, but I wonder the type of rums that they're putting in, whether it's Rolling Fork or another brand, that they're already gearing this towards, the Ascot Awards are going to be very heavily like whiskey forward, bourbon-esque type things, and maybe that's affecting how they're kind of viewing this. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we've talked to the two founders of Rolling Fork on the podcast, and I think they're pretty upfront about like they're kind of putting out rums designed for bourbon drinkers, right? And I think they're not alone in that, by the way. We've heard that from lots of even very big brands are really trying to target and convert bourbon drinkers into rum drinkers. So I definitely think that's part of it. And when you asked me what I thought won, there's a reason why the first thing that came to mind was and not that Foursquare intentionally puts out rum aimed at bourbon drinkers. I don't think they try to make their rum taste like bourbon or anything like that, but it does have a flavor profile that when we talk to bourbon drinkers, a lot of them are drawn to. So that's why I guess that. And I think Rolling Fork is similar. They're doing a lot of the secondary maturation and very specifically selected in different types of bourbon casks. So I think there's a natural like interest level from bourbon drinkers, because a lot of them know about these nuanced differences between the distilleries that they're getting these casks from and everything. So, they know the difference between a wheated bourbon and, a regular bourbon. My lack of bourbon knowledge is showing now. But, so, whether they were like, let's engineer the ultimate Ascot Award winning rum. I don't know if they went that far, but I think it's just like a natural confluence of things that ultimately doesn't make it that surprising to me that rum stood out. Although, Martin Cape was a judge as well. And he doesn't come from a bourbon enthusiast background. So, but again, and you mentioned that competitions like this are inherently flawed. I think one of the inherent flaws in competitions is you will maybe know who the finalists were, but I have yet to see a competition, and maybe there's one out there, so let me know if there is, but I've never seen one where they tell you the entire field. Right. And the reason for that is obvious. You have people paying to enter a competition and they don't win anything. They don't want that being, publicized everywhere. Our rum came in last place or whatever. So, but I think that's what makes these challenging if you're a spirits enthusiast is, okay, this won, but what was it up against? In this case, it was up against like a Myers single cask release, which are fairly unremarkable in general releases. So it's not surprising to me that it beat that.
Yeah. I'm conflicted, right? Because number one, I do think there's a space for rums like this that I'm one of those people that loves them, I really do. But I also, on the other hand, like you're saying, if there was a Clarin or a Reunion rum that was submitted and didn't make it because it just didn't have that kind of a profile that they were, even looking for in the first place, that's kind of weird, right? Or if they didn't put those in at all because they already know that that's probably not the field that they want to enter into. Yeah. It's kind of different. So it's, again, speaks back to rum's diversity and how it can be very interesting and why we love it, but also can be very challenging in a lot of ways. So anyhow, the headline, I think, is that the rum did very well in this blind spirits competition, and that the next step in this is it's going to go against Best in Show whiskey. So if it were
it's not over? They keep going? Okay.
Yeah, well,
interesting.
So I think they're releasing these videos week after week on purpose, like stringing it out. So I think it's happened, but I don't think the information's out yet. At least I haven't found it if it is. But that would be something if the Rolling Fork rum beats the Best in Show whiskey.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I think with any of these competitions, if you're someone who's trying to suss out how much meaning can I take away from this, I think it's really important to know the background of the competition, like sort of the context it was judged in and everything. Yeah. And that's where it gets hard because you don't always have all of that information. So yeah, anytime rum gets a little bit of spotlight from something, I think that's generally good. Sometimes it's sometimes the spotlight can be on certain products or things that maybe I don't think are as good for the category, but generally I think it's a good thing. Competitions, as you can tell, I have very conflicted feelings on them. So that's again why I said we will probably never have one.
Yeah. Speaking of, there was also at least 10 products that were double platinum award winners that were whiskeys finished in some sort of rum barrel. Ex-rum barrel, I should say. So that was a lot. I was like, whoa, that's a lot of them.
That is a lot.
Comparatively to I think it was 2 last year. There were products that were ex-rum barrel
It sounds a lot to me just for there to be 10 double platinum winners of any type whatsoever in any competition. Again, this is when I start getting cynical about these things. So,
right, well, we should probably blend into something else at this point.
Let's blend into the transition here. This interview is super interesting, and I know we had Mitch Wilson from Black Tot on the podcast probably 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And when we talked to Mitch, even in that interview, he mentioned a guy named Oliver Chilton, who's their blender. And even at the time, we were both super interested in talking to him and really getting deep into the blending side of things. Because, what they do from a blending perspective is so interesting. I think a lot of our listeners will be familiar with the brand, but, they have Black Tot's Finest Caribbean, which is a blend of rums from throughout the Caribbean. They also do their Master Blenders Reserve every year, which I think sort of where Black Tot got the spotlight originally was the last consignment release, and a lot of people listening will be familiar with that. That was rum from original British Navy flagons that was blended and put into this release. It's like the last, available rum that was blended for the British Royal Navy, and very high price release. And so Black Tot was kind of the brand that was an offshoot of that, where it was like, let's do more cool shit with blending, basically. The Master Master Blender's yearly releases, Reserve MBR, I think is the acronym that Oliver used a lot. Those incorporate like a little bit of that flagon rum because they still have some. And in fact, we talked with Oliver about how much they still have, but they've been doing a lot of really interesting stuff. They just redid sort of that Finest Caribbean blend. We talked to Oliver about like what prompted that and how do you go about doing a new version of that blend. And then they also have a really interesting, more always available, not yearly limited release called their historic Solera release. And I know anytime the word Solera comes up in rum, it can be kind of like a 4-letter word sometimes.
Or a 5-letter, like awards.
Or yeah, exactly. I think awards is 6 letters.
6 letters.
Yeah.
I meant award, but then
exactly.
award sounded weird. Yeah.
So we got deep into some really interesting Solera stuff and just like how sherry casks are used in not only rum but whiskey as well, because they're up there in Scotland where they have their aging warehouse and they do a lot of stuff with Scotch. They have a distillery up there as well now too. So learned a lot of really interesting stuff about blending and sherry casks that I did not know before. And yeah, really interesting interview. I'm excited for people to hear it.
Yeah, Oliver seems like a really good hang. Like he's a cool dude.
He was a fun interview for sure.
Yeah, and it's always nice to hear people's process and their thought processes with how this comes together. So I was happy we were able to dig into that a little bit with him, and just to hear some of the stuff that's coming too.
Yeah, they're up to a lot of stuff that I did not realize was sort of on the table for them. Yeah. So I feel like I learned a lot about interesting blending related stuff, but then also just a lot of stuff that surprised me about sort of where they're going and things that might be coming in the future from them. So I'm excited for people to hear it. But with that said, should we just blend on over to the interview?
Let's do it.
All right, we're here with Oliver Chilton, the head blender for Elixir Distillers, the company behind Black Tot Rum. And Oliver, I think anytime I've imagined what this call would be like in my head, because I think the first time we talked to someone about you was when we had Mitch Wilson on the podcast, like, what was that, like 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, maybe
John?
3 years ago. Yeah.
It was a long time ago, and he told us about this Oliver guy who was really the brains behind all the blends and everything.
He lies. All the things he told you not true. Were they nice? Hang on.
Well, I always imagined you kind of in a very elaborate sort of rum laboratory surrounded by, dusty samples and all sorts of stuff and
weird
and your
shaped tools.
Exactly. Yeah. You're tuning in now. I don't know if you're on vacation or something. You mentioned you were in Islay, so you're actually our second rum related interview from Islay. We interviewed the Islay Rum Company a little while ago. Some of the interesting things that are going on there. But excited to have you on after all these years and find out more about what you do, even if the background isn't the fancy rum laboratory that John and I had imagined.
Well, I'm afraid the background is a house we use on Islay. Has beautiful views. Well, I'm over here because it's Islay Festival this week, Feshiel. So we are building a distillery here on Islay, just up the Ben. We're literally just around the corner from Ben.
Nice.
We're a little bit bigger. I love Ben to bits. I've been into his distillery many times. It's a great place to visit. If you ever get a chance to come to the UK, it's definitely worth visiting Islay. And there will be lots of rum-related things to do here. So we're building here. We're over for the week, mainly talking about whiskey, because we obviously bottle and make some whiskeys that are distilled here on Islay. I've also spuriously brought some rum and Speyside whiskey with me because I like to be different. So I've got that with me as well. And we'll be pouring some of that on Wednesday for some friends of our company who come over with us, and we have a bit of a party. And we're also showing a couple of people around the distillery we're building. It's mainly a malt whiskey distillery. It's quite a large or reasonable sized malt whiskey distillery, South Coast of Islay. But because at the time when we started planning it in 2014, we thought we'd only have one distillery. We thought we should probably do everything. So we're building a smaller distillery inside the distillery.
A distillery within a distillery.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called the Alchemist Workshop, and it's the basic plan was, or the basic request was, I need to be able to make everything.
It's a small request. Just need to make everything.
It's a small. we used to call it the pilot plant, and then we realized that technically it can make 200,000 liters, so it's quite a big pilot plant.
Wow.
Too big to be a pilot, yeah.
But it's designed to make rum, rye whiskey. Like if we want to do pretty much any style of spirit, we can work it one way or the other.
Okay.
So gin's a bit of a struggle, and we have no real desire to mess around in that world. But yeah, so that's the plan.
I imagine. Yeah.
They're not right to vodka. A category, from my point of view as a blender, a category that starts with must be flavorless. So things are a little bit irrelevant.
So if we fast forward 5 years from now, are we talking about the newest entry into a Black Tot blend where it's your own distilled on Islay rum going into the blend? Is that a possible future?
Well, maybe even in a year or two. Who knows?
Oh,
wow. We're hopefully starting production end of this year, start of next. And we'll start in the Alchemist House probably later in next year, 2026. And I've never been particularly fussy, although most of our blends are, pretty much all of them contain aged rum. We're not, I've never been precious about using unaged rum.
Sure.
I don't think, it's a flavor thing rather than a category thing. So, yeah, but I guess it depends what we make.
Well, so is your role staying on the blending side, or are you going to also start dabbling in a little distilling as well?
Oh no, distillers are engineers and scientists. They know what they're doing. They're qualified. I am at best an enthusiastic drinker. I don't pretend to have any expertise. So no, we've got a fantastic distillery manager here on Islay called Georgie Crawford, who previously ran Lagavulin Distillery here on Islay, and we've got a great team over in Speyside as well. So I'm surrounded by people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I asked just because as we were preparing for the interview, I was kind of looking over your background and everything, and you've been with Whisky Exchange, Elixir Distillers, that team for a long time now, and kind of have steadily increased your responsibilities along the way. I wanted to kind of rewind to, am I correct? I think I came across an interview where you said your first connection to all this was working at one of the Whisky Exchange shops. Is that the case?
Yeah, so I started in retail. My first job was in retail, actually in a city called York, working for initially a whiskey shop, and then I became kind of the spirit specialist at a wine shop there, part of a chain. And I was there until 2011, and then I moved to London. And at the time, the Whisky Exchange was quite a small business back then. We only had about 35 people, I guess. So it wasn't quite the scale I guess it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And I started as a part-timer, a 0-hour contract in our shop. We had one shop with no windows.
No windows? Wow.
No front door. Amazing smell of dead rat. Underneath the train tracks in London Bridge. We had, it was a weird kind of cave. So one, you had to find it, and if you managed to get in it, you found that we had somewhere in the region of 1,000 different whiskeys, maybe 200, 300 different rums, pretty significant collection of gin, vodka, etc., etc. And as a shop assistant, your job was I was about to say drink all of it, to learn about it. So that was my first job with the Whisky Exchange. I stayed in that shop for about 18 months.
You got in on the ground floor there, huh?
Very much so,
you might say.
Or maybe underneath the ground floor, perhaps, given the location of the shop.
It's kind of sad it doesn't exist anymore because we had to move that shop out. But it was a great place to learn about spirits in general. From my background, it was a great place to learn about rum. I mean, I enjoyed rum as a drink, even at university. And then through my time with Odlin's Wine Shop, we stocked pretty limited selection. But Whisky Exchange is the place where I came in and there's suddenly 200, 300 products. So you're going, all right, there's a category here that I have to know about to be able to talk about it. So I really started to learn about rum in that shop and at that time. And then from there, we kind of evolved our business in a pretty weird way. So we always did a little bit of what's independent bottling on the whiskey side, a small amount on the rum side, not very much, but we had casks. So we used to have some. We've actually still got some stock of it. We had some old Trinidad 97
Wow.
lighter spirit style. We had some Caroni. We had a bit of Guyana, older Guyana, but it wasn't a big part of the business at all. And when I left, so I moved out of the shop in 2000 and end of 2012, going into 2013, and I moved to my role was mainly around events and putting on shows and stuff like that. But alongside that, we used to do bottlings for those events. So I ended up looking after the cask buying for that. So sourcing and it was the easiest job. Quite literally the easiest job. Any independent bottler who says they've got a hard time, they're doing it wrong. You literally try it too much and go, that tastes nice, and you go, bottle it. There's some logistics issues, and I give you that. The packaging's the painful thing. I hate packaging. In my ideal world, we'd get rid of all packaging and sell things in drums.
Just a plastic bag.
Buy the drum.
Yeah. Buy the drum. But yeah, we were. That was kind of where I cut my teeth with whiskey and rum in terms of working with it, was in that independent bottling space.
So, at what point does somebody come to you and say, "We've got this rum idea. How would you like to try your hand at blending?" I'm assuming you were maybe doing some blending stuff for them with whiskey prior to Black Tot. How did that kind of come about?
Well, indeed, I took on first elements of Islay, which was our blended Islay brand, where we were buying small parcels of Islay whiskey, and from that I also took on Port Ascot, which is an Islay single malt. We done a bigger batches of casks, so all kind of relatively straightforward stuff. And there were some small blend projects we were doing. Black Tot at the time, so we'd already launched Last and Simon, and Sukhinder had made that. So that was Sukhinder's thing that he put together, where he blended two kind of styles of flagons together to create. And I had to run sales as well at the time, so it wasn't, it wasn't like I wasn't doing a wholly liquid role. I also was in charge of all the markets, so we were in about a dozen different markets around the world. So part of the job was going to those markets and talking about product, and part of the job was sourcing, and part of the job was doing packaging and all that nonsense. So you had to learn quite a lot quite quickly.
You're wearing a lot of hats. Yeah.
One of them became really clear was Black Tot was it was difficult to get people into last consignment because frankly it was $1,000 a bottle. Yeah. And we were happy to open some bottles, but you need people to drink it, right? People need to drink it to understand it, to tell the story. So Sukhinder and I were chatting about how we do that, and we thought, what we could do is we could reimagine blending in terms of rum and create something accessible, and that was Finest Caribbean. And we probably started that project 2017. We talked about rum. We had a couple of other rum projects on the go before that, so we were buying stocks here and there. But in terms of Black Tot, 2017 we started Finest Caribbean, and we messed around for 2 years, putting things together, working closely with Skier in terms of sourcing and working out how it would be put together. I think Carsten by the end both loved and hated me in equal measure.
Wait, why is that? Just because you were going back and forth so many times with requests, or?
So the first meetings were all in his office, and to be fair, if you go there, it's quite useful because you can work through samples and put stuff together on a bench together. And I would genuinely say most people that would be a good way to start if you want to start a little rum blend. From there, Carsten started sending like 3 samples at a time of different ideas that we'd come up with, and then I would go away and I'd reblend them. And then I'd send them back, and I'd say, right, I didn't like what you sent, but I found if I took this one, added this way, and then tweaked this, it worked really well. Can you make that, please? And he'd go, the maths on this is not that simple. So I think we were like 26 iterations into this, and then we'll go back to iteration 19. So the first recipe was recipe 19, but we were 26 recipes in by the time we went backwards to 19, and that was just.
Wait a second. So you had 19 iterations. You did 7 more to get to 26, and then you said, "Actually, I think we had it right at 19," and you reverted back to that.
Well, I was also doing stuff in the background, so I was adjusting alcohol strength and looking at how it worked, and you quite often let things sit, and so it took a while to go back and forth, and that it was a good way to start. Like I genuinely think I learned a lot working with Carsten. I learned a lot about rum and how to blend. Even it helped me with process for whiskey as well. It's not exactly like that today. We still buy bulk rum from Skier. We buy bulk rum direct. We buy from other places as well. We buy a lot, pretty much all the time. The kind of game changer for us is we now own our own bond up in Speyside in Scotland, a distillery called Tormore, which I live at, and so we bring most of our rum straight into Tormore, and then we can mess around on site, so we've got a little bit more freedom, and then that allows us to bring in other ingredients if we want to.
Oliver, I was just going to ask though, so I'm trying to piece this together. So you've done all of these different things, you've wearing all these different hats for a while, and then you decide, you know what, I'm going to jump into this blend thing, and I just have to know, like, is there a moment where you go, you know what, I might actually be pretty good at this? Or was it just always a question mark for you?
I've not got there yet. Maybe a few years' time, I'll tell you. No, I don't. I'm not. I don't believe in, like, you're making product all the time, essentially to please people. Right? That's what you're doing. You're only ever trying to make a drink that tastes good so other people enjoy it. And you are kind of limited by what you taste. So it's not that I think I've ever had a massive confidence in it particularly. It's more that you keep making stuff, and in my case, like, I answer to one guy. I'm very lucky. I work for a small family business. We're owned by 2 brothers. I work directly with both of them.
So as long as they agree, your life is good.
Pretty much, yeah. So my job is to make Sikander happy. That's it. And we'll have disagreements or arguments. But I have an awful lot of freedom to have ideas and to experiment and to change bits, as long as I've got a good reason. And from a flavor point of view, the 2 of us kind of agree. So we have very similar palates. We kind of probably aim at similar things. There are differences. So, we can maybe talk about things we're doing at the moment a bit later, but with Master Blenders Reserve, there's certain iterations of that are very much Sikander iterations, and there are iterations that are mine, and based on different preferences we have. But Finest Caribbean was very much trying to find a halfway house between the 2 of us, I think. He had a real affinity for heavier styles. I wanted fruitier styles. So it was trying to balance that. And the hope, I guess the hope for us was that, but if you balance those 2 things, then you end up something that pleases a lot of people. But I would say with Finest Caribbean, unlike other businesses, what we weren't doing is we weren't sitting there going, I wonder what everybody needs. Maybe we should have done that. Maybe that would have been a much better way to process. I have a really good friend of mine who works with me today, John, who he heads up advocacy, and at the time he comes from a bar background, so I'd quite often give him samples I was working on for Black Tot and say, what do you think? Think about it from a mixing point of view. And I remember him coming to me once when I finished it, and he said, well, it's nothing like you set out to make, but it tastes exactly like something I'd imagine you'd make. Taking it a compliment. Take it.
Wait, what does it mean that it was nothing like you set out to make? Did the final blend ultimately end up being a lot different than the original vision?
I think one of the things I'd said is it probably needs to be more mixable, and he's like, well, it's a great drinker. Yeah. I mean, I don't really sit at home. I mean, I do love cocktails. I do mixed drinks. But my heart and soul is in sipping. I love, that's the politest way of saying what I love. I've even used a tasting glass, not a pint glass tonight. I've been very sensible. So yeah, I think the original version was always to be a little bit more mixable than we ended up with. That being said, we're still adjusting, right? So we've adjusted the recipe again.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that some, actually. One of the things that we've always talked with other people who have blends is most of the time a blend is also having a lot of volume, right? Because you're trying to create consistency and volume for your product. So now we're seeing that there's this new blend of Black Tot's Finest Caribbean out there. And I was definitely interested in you discussing the differences between the old blend and the new one. And if you could talk about the factors that went into that, or restrictions that might have went into that and creating the new final product.
The only restrictions that have ever been set on Finest Caribbean was set probably pretty early on, and one was that we wanted to include Guyana because, you know, the history of the brand dates back to Navy rum, and there has to be a nod to that. I wanted to include Jamaican rum. This is right from the beginning, because when I think of rum, I think of super tutti fruity things.
Yeah.
You know, and if you write it as a tasting note, and it's such a weird thing, but, you know, it's a tasting note I've used for whiskey. So when I've had stuff, I've gone like, that has this flavor. And if I look at what that flavor is, and I now look at all the rums in the world, I'm pretty much living in a world between Hamden and Worthy Park, right? So that's something, that's my interpretation. We always knew we wanted to include Barbados because it has that kind of honey thing. And particularly when you're working with something like Foursquare, where it's really approachable, and it needs, you know, to your point, if you're making a blend, or you're making any rum, really, you're making a drink, you want it to be accessible, and Foursquare makes things accessible. That's naturally a fact. So the change, apart from those rules being there, the only reason the change came about is because while I was working with Master Blenders Reserve, I was buying quite a bit of rum from Trinidad, various ages, and I was completely in love with one style, which kind of tastes like stone fruit, tastes like peaches, and I loved using it. It was never kind of a big thing in any of the blends, but it created so much balance. It was a great tool. And I was chatting with someone else I think you've had on here, Ian Hoyle, about that. And we were talking about, because I was doing a trade with him at the time, and how you got there. And then I remember going to Skinder because they wanted to change the label. I said, well, if you change the label, can I adjust the blend?
I just want to sneak this Trinidad in there. It's really going to bring it all together.
Because I just feel like I've been using this as a technique. It's been really useful. So Skinner was like, well, you know, if you think it'll improve the recipe. And we never said it was the end, right? So unlike a lot of companies, and you're right, most companies start with, how do I get consistency? We live in a world of how do I get perfection? No, you're not going to achieve. Right? You know you're not going to get there, but what you have to do is work every day to change it a little bit. So I sat down with Skier and I said, okay, this is my idea. I want a Trinidad rum. And I went over to Carsten, we sat down and we tried some different iterations. So taking heavy and light styles and basically created a bespoke blend of a Trinidad rum that we then used in Finest Caribbean. And it was just taking experience, really. I'm not, you know, Black Tot from my point of view is a learning journey. And I never claimed to be an expert. Not in whiskey, certainly not in rum. Like it's just a journey I'm on. It's part of the joy. So the change is really, I guess, a reflection of that. It's a reflection of bits we've learned along the way.
Yeah. So you had up to 26 different iterations of the first Black Tot's Finest. Did you have quite so many on the new one, or you kind of knew exactly where you were going?
We added maybe another 9 or 10. So it wasn't that bad, you know.
Half as much.
Yeah.
So this I'm assuming this Trinidad rum that you're talking about, I pulled up the website just to see what the breakdown is. And so this is the rum that in the new blend, it's 35% of the blend, the 2 to 4 year old Trinidad. Is that right? And I'm assuming that's a TDL Trinidad. You're not
TDL, yeah.
You don't somehow have some 2 to 4 year old Coroni that you put into a product at this price point. Yeah.
No, although sometimes I think we could probably throw in a couple of liters. Why do for that? No, it's TDL rum. And I think there is a further breakdown. I don't think we put it on the website. I know I've given it to Mitch because he kept asking me.
We'll have to. We'll splice Mitch in here afterwards, and he can explain it quickly. I am kind of curious. You've talked about it a little bit, but when you sit down to start blending let's say it could be one of the yearly Master's Blender Reserve rums. What does that process look like? How do you do try number one? Do you have certain combinations that you know are kind of like go-tos to start from and build from at this point? Yeah, I have no idea what it's like approaching a blend with that many components. So where do you begin?
So MBR is slightly different because I normally have a brief. So then the brief is not, it's not like a the dream is a big marketing brief where you know exactly what they want. The brief is normally Sukhinder and I sitting there drinking the previous years and going, what should we do next year? And sometimes that has an idea in it. So, or sometimes you've had something from the previous blend that maybe you were working on. So I guess my point is there's no consistency to it, I'm afraid.
So it's kind of like you have the last one as a jumping off point from like, here's what we did last year. How can we bring something different to the table?
Even previous years. So there was one 2020, I guess it was 23. 23 is the one where was it 22 where the list got so long I didn't fit on the label anymore.
Yeah.
That really upset Mitch.
I'm glad you can't remember because I certainly cannot remember all the different year stuff. It is a lot of components in there.
So we basically for the first 2 years, so 50th anniversary and 21, we put all the ingredients labeled. So 22 we didn't. And the reason that happened was because while I was messing around with 21, we bought a parcel, like a few different parcels of older Jamaican rum. And I've become quite obsessed with the idea of making just a Jamaican blend. Not for work. I was enjoying
just for fun.
Yeah. So I created this blend and I was sitting there going, this is wonderful, but it's really intense. Definitely a blending tool, not a finished product. There are very few people that have tried it. There are some who really loved it, such as Mr. Wilson, and he's still angry at me for never releasing it. So I created it. And then I was sitting there afterwards going, well, I'd really like to use this. So then I started building, because I couldn't get enough of certain vintages of like, I was short on a vintage of Barbados. And so I was like, okay, well, let me try and build up a Barbados style. Before I knew it, I ended up with these 4 massive blends. I'm like, okay, well, I obviously can't use all of this. So then I started blending them in ratios, and that became 2022. The upshot of that is, and I had loads of like leftover bits, so you end up with bits of this, and so they ended up being kind of kickoff points for other blends that I was making, if that makes sense. So that was one side of it, and then the other side is I would have Sukhinder come to me and be like, I really love this rum I've tried, or there's this historic rum, I really want to kind of replicate some of the flavors I'm finding in it. 2021 is a great example. So 2020 or 50th anniversary was all about kind of trying to make a super Navy style, a big, rich, heavy thing. And while we were doing that, I was kind of annoyed because I really wanted to do like a deep tropical fruit thing.
You're going the opposite direction, yeah.
So 21 was my kickback, basically. So he got to have 50th anniversary, but I get to have 2021.
It's a good
and then
compromise.
You end up with bits left from all of these things. And even going into 2025, so 2025, we're 5 years on from when we started. And Sukhinder said, I really want you to go back and I want to do 50th anniversary on steroids. That's what.
So wait, that's what 2025 is going to be?
Yeah. So that's what 2025 is. It's been bottled, so it's just waiting to come out into the world. I brought one here.
There it is.
So this was the line sample because I have to check the first bottle. It's a hard job. It was running on the line as I drove through the bottling hall. We start with that. So that gives you a place to go. Okay, so I know I want to make the style. So I'm going to look at Guyana. You're looking at the stocks you're holding. You're looking at stocks you can buy in. And then that kind of gives you some bits to work with. And it is at that point, it's as simple as getting out maybe 100 different styles of rum, 100 different rums on the table.
I like how you said at that point it's as simple as, and then you said getting out 100 styles of rum. Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds simple enough.
You just have to have a really big table and a lot of patience.
Yeah, ideally someone to help you, which I don't have. You guys are
we're available. Yeah, we're
we'll
available,
be in
by the
Isla
way.
soon. Yeah.
So yeah, you get out different cask samples, and I normally split it. So I'll go through one mark, one vintage at a time, and I'll write notes up on those samples. Make sure that you're looking for consistency between them. So how interchangeable are the casks? Is there anything that's completely out there? And then I'll have like flavor categories I want to go to. So if I'm doing something like 2025, which we've just finished, you're going, okay, well, I know I need that kind of big licorice hit. So I know these rums in theory fit there. Get those out, check them. And then you start looking for fun stuff because there's got to be some fun stuff. So
yeah,
I'm going to throw in some Caroni because we can. And it gives you certain flavors, right? So I know if someone says Navy rum, you kind of think diesel, right? You want that there. So this is the best place to get that. And the final bit for this year, which kind of harks back to that thing of saying you've always got remnants and leftovers, was I'd spent about 3 months trying to make this blend, and it just wasn't singing. It just wasn't quite right. And I kept taking to Sekinda, and he was like, it's not turned up enough. And I was walking through warehouse 2 at Tormore, where we'd moved all our rum into, and there's this sherry butt, and it's Black Tot 50th anniversary, and it's the final sherry butt, because when we did 21, we had 5 butts, and I used 4 of them, and I kept the one I liked the most.
Nice.
No other reason. I thought at some point that'd be nice. I'll drink that one day.
So it's Master Blender's reserve, basically. There's like 2 levels of being reserved.
Completely.
This is the Inception episode so far. Yeah.
Yeah. So I grabbed a sample of it, and I obviously worked out the ratios, and I threw that into the blend and sent it. I think I actually flew down to London. I said, you need to try this. And I just watched his face, and I went, yeah, fine, we're good to go.
It almost reminds me the way you were talking about how so many ideas for future blends come out of things that you weren't able to use in a past blend. It kind of reminds me of sometimes you'll hear sort of, behind the music stories of bands recording an album, and they end up with like a few songs that like they really liked, but they couldn't figure out how to make them work. And then years later, they'll end up coming out on something and become like a classic song. So it's kind of cool that you have a chance to resurrect some of those ideas and bring them to life in future blends.
Yeah, the future blends basically are just George Harrison's back catalogue of everything that he's
Exactly. Yeah. It's your
Ringo
all things
Starr's
must pass.
B-sides.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. It's going to be the least interesting question we're going to ask you today, most likely. But I have to ask
don't sell it. Don't oversell it, John.
Well, my head was swimming as you were talking about. You have all of these kind of bits left over from previous blends that you end up maybe using into a new blend. But that means then you have to have all of the previous information from that bit there, and now you have to probably do all of the math to figure out the percentages of how that works together with all of the other ones. So, like, how long do you spend doing that and figuring that out? Or is it kind of like it's 10%?
So, I don't have to work it out for me, right? So, for absolute clarity, all of the transparency side, which is, it was very much driven, a lot of it came from Mitch and Sekinda talking about what they felt about rum. From my point of view, I was actually never that fussed, right? That sounds awful. I just want to make nice tasting things. And there's a lot of lovely freedom in that, because I don't have to care what went in before, as long as it tastes good and it does the job.
Yeah.
However, to make Mr. Wilson happy and to make the marketing team happy and everyone else, at the end, I basically have to sit down and get spreadsheets out and go, we have a computer system that holds all the information. So it's not that bad. And if I'm feeling really grumpy about it, we've got a fantastic brand manager in Ryan Adair, the lovely guy. So when I'm really grumpy, I just say, look, here's the spreadsheets. You go and figure out what I make. But from a making point of view, I'm not worried. If I've made something before, I'm worried about what it tastes like today. And so I'm thinking about the flavors of it. I'm not thinking, put, it had 10% Corona in it, or it had 100% Hamden or anything like that. That's not in my radar when I'm using it.
Gotcha. And Ryan's not coming back to you and saying you're at 9.8% Corona. Can you just dab a little bit more in there so we get to the rounds?
I mean, we let Excel do the roundups. Yeah, yeah. The small percentages is literally. So what you're doing, if you ever took it all the way out, it would look ridiculous.
I want 9 decimal places on the next release for each component. Yeah,
what goes on the label? That's all that. Yeah, I tried really hard this year. This year, I managed to get down to 9 or 10 components, but I managed to get it on the back of the label. So I'm feeling pretty happy about that. So you only have to look on the website for 2 things to figure out what they are. That was me trying to make Mitch happy.
Nice.
Yeah, if he complains less, life is easier. So.
Oliver, I'm curious, you were just talking about how sometimes if you want a certain flavor profile in a blend, you kind of know what category of rums or specific rums you're going to reach for. Are there any sort of flavor profiles that you think are particularly irreplaceable? Like, are there certain rums that you use in blends where it's just like there's nothing else, no other combination of things I could put together to achieve what this specific rum does? And if that does exist, I'm curious which one that is for you.
So irreplaceable is interesting. I'm not sure because the category's changing so much, right? So
yeah.
There's so much new stuff coming, and I'm not at the forefront. I'm really not. I don't think I am anyway. I'm very lucky to work in an industry that's very welcoming, very happy to share, right? And I get to work with great people. And not just in our company, but mainly outside. So people like Carsten or Ian, who I used to be able to phone up and just say, okay, what's interesting, what's new, and they'd send me samples. But in terms of what I'm working with, that from a flavor category, I'd be really sad to lose. Obviously, Guyana, because I do think there's certain flavors. If you're looking at, whether it's Pommerant or something like that,
yeah.
Is it irreplaceable? Possibly not. I think I'd probably know in my soul if it wasn't there.
That's a good way to describe it, yeah.
Like, in terms of what I'm working on at the moment, the reason Trinidad's in the new blend is because I've just enjoyed using it so much as a thing to bring everything together, this hook. But if you took out that rum and you tried it on its own, I don't think either of you would be like, oh, well, this is the most standout group of flavors. It works so well to bring stuff together.
Yeah.
And then in terms of particularly rums from Barbados and particularly Foursquare, I think to lose something so approachable and so easy to get people into a category would be tragic.
Yeah.
And it is massively usable. But then, most of that rum we're bringing in is blended rum, right? It's from one place, but it's already
right.
Richard has already messed around with this rum to make sure that it's
it's already going to be a pot and column blend of some proportions. Yeah,
it's got his stamp on it. Yeah,
there's certainly we've used the few times we've got to use Hamden in blends, the different Hamdens we're sitting on. You can see they add something particularly special, particularly different. And really some of the old stuff we get to mess around with whether you're grabbing like 40-plus-year-old Pommerant or some of the 96 particularly. Well, I think we've only got one barrel of 96 Corona left, and I'll be pretty sad when that goes.
Oh yeah.
But there's even in that there's different styles, and they're not on the paperwork, right? So there's no way of I can't identify them outside of sitting there with a load of samples and going, that one and that one are not the same.
On that kind of topic, I'm curious to hear about maybe some of the coolest individual rums you've gotten to work with so far in a blend, and are there any where you've had, and you just mentioned that 96 Corona and how you'd be sad when it's gone, if you could kind of bottle one rum you've gotten to work with and have it forever, is there a certain one that comes to mind if you could have like an infinite supply of a rare rum?
Yeah.
Of course.
But it's going to sound so self-serving. We still have a pretty amazing supply of flagons. So when Sekinder did last consignment, I I think Mitch probably went through this story, but basically he bought flagons from a couple of companies. He bought some privately, but most of it came from two companies.
Mm-hmm.
And this was quite early days. And he basically, from where he was sitting, he identified two styles, right? So he said one's with red stripes and one without stripe. We've recently done a big kind of categorization of all our flagons. My wife's a historian, and
that comes in handy.
Yeah.
It's not. She's quite useful to have on site. So we got her to record every single flagon we still own. So now we've got the detail of the vintage they were filled, where they were filled, everything else. And the thing we identified that Sukhinder unwittingly identified was that the ones with the stripes came from one dock and the ones without came from a different.
That makes sense.
There were two distinct styles. There's probably lots of subsections within that. So he'd identify these two styles and put them together. We still use, I'll still grab 5, 6, 7 flagons and throw it into MBR. And I'm doing it
like groceries. You have to carry them all at once. No.
I mean, they've got great handles. It's fantastic.
Yeah, you just pour them all like that. Yeah.
In some ways, I think we probably should have filmed it just to watch people do them. But it's a great tool because it adds. It's such a tiny part of what we do. Like it'll be like 0.5%, 1% or something. Which I think when someone looks at it, they go, "Oh, they're just doing that as a nod." What you miss is that it has this bustiness, this dustiness. It's flagons partly because they've been sitting in essentially in a clay pot for what? Yeah, well, most of the ones we've got are 55, 54. So they've been sitting there in that flagon for 70 years at this point. And they are evolving in there. They're not changing massively, but they are slowly evolving. So they create this kind of dustiness. And I do think that certainly in some of the MBRs, you can taste it. So yeah, it sounds horribly self-serving, but I think when we run out of flagons, I'll feel massively sad that we don't have that ability to pick that up and have that slight nod to the past. Know that it is doing something different. It's also fantastic. Like I've got a lovely team at Tormore who I work with in the warehouse, right? They're fantastic guys, but they've worked in whiskey warehousing all their lives, right? So they basically push casks. That's what they do. And if you ask them what they drink, it's Glenlivet, etc. It's Speyside, so they don't drink any smoky stuff. Not allowed that. When I rocked up with rum, the look on their face was firstly confusion, and secondly, oh my god, we really like this stuff. Like the excitement. So when you get to show them these flagons, you're going, look, let me explain the history, the kind of excitement. So I think more than anything, I'll hate losing that. Not being able to share that little bit with everybody would be devastating.
Are you able to say how many you think you have left at this point?
I think 1,000.
1,000?
Wow. Okay. So it's
There's
significant.
There might be some more. I need to check. But everything's still on site. There'll be some good videos coming out with some pictures and things on them.
Nice.
Because Ryan wanted to interview my wife to find out about them, and she was like, "I don't know about rum. I'm an art." She had a lot of fun showing them all flag.
So we've got a few more years of flagons at least.
Yeah. Well, it depends what we decide to do because we found some stories in them that are incredible. There's some lovely stories about where they traveled to and where they came back from, and there's some really lovely stories about where they were filled. Like we've got a really small parcel that were filled in Singapore, and so there's little things like that are amazing. Tell you about
subdivisions,
how the blend was evolving and who was evolving it, which I think, we don't. Black Tot isn't a Navy rum. Right? It's not a Navy blend. That's not what we're making. But what I do love is I love the tradition of the evolution. Everything we're trying to do is around evolution of blending, and that story is amazing. Like finding out. It's a real. This is where you find out I did a degree in philosophy. It's.
I already looked that up. I had a question for you later.
you get a real insight into humankind. Like you really do, because you're seeing how we're evolving our drink. It's a drink, right? In reality, all we really need is water or alcohol if you're on a boat. That's it, right? But instead of just drinking vodka, which we all could do, you could suffer it. I mean, we've all done it. We've all had a gin and tonic. But instead we looked at this and went, no, 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 no. One, we're going to make rum. And then what we're going to do is mess around with it continuously, hundreds of years to make different flavors. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's the best example of what it is to be human there is.
Here, here. And speaking of messing around with it, so we talked about you have some of these older components. You mentioned the Caroni that you still have at least one of, the flagons that are there. I know you're working with Skier still, or Sekinder and some other people. Are there any more recent surprises or super interesting things that you have found or procured that might end up in some future limited releases?
We completely separately, but we bought from someone else an amazing parcel of kind of mixed parcel of old Jamaican rum, which I'm kind of seeping into things, like 30-plus-year-old stuff. There's some really interesting bits in there.
Nice.
Lots of different marks, not all from the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some bits to come from there. We're working on a very small project at the moment in the background, where we might put a little nod in from that. And apart from that, I'm also kind of enjoying discovering new places. We've obviously come from Australia before, and Panama, and there's all sorts of little bits and pieces that would come across the desk that you're like, oh, that's kind of fascinating, and I've not really thought of that. So sometimes that's kind of interesting stuff. I am probably not right now, but maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm quite hopeful to use British rum. I've not had the chance to buy any yet, but we will get there. I just need time. Time is really my enemy more than anything else. But we've got so many amazing distilleries here in the UK. Modern distilleries making great rum. I'm on Isla. Ben makes
got one right
rum.
Next door to you.
Yeah.
So, if they'll let us, why wouldn't we? It'd be a shame not to kind of celebrate that. That's kind of, I hope we get to do that in the next few years.
Yeah. On the note of recent things, the new Finest Caribbean blend isn't the only new thing to come out. The other one is this bottle, which I wanted to ask you about, the historic Solera blend. I feel like it's hearing about all the stuff that you guys have going on and how much messing around you like to do. It seems kind of natural for someone to just be like, hey, why don't we set up our own little Solera system? Is that how the idea came about? Like where was the impulse to create your own Solera system?
Got two sides to it. One is reactionary and being difficult. There's lots of companies, not just in rum, but in whiskey as well, who use the word Solera a lot. And I love sherry, right? Love sherry, not just, I quite like a bottle of PX at Christmas. No. Sherry is, if you've not been, Jerez is the place to go. It's a cheap holiday, the wine's amazing, and you just sit in the sun, drinking a bottle of Fino, eating olives, and life is great.
Yeah.
And the way they do fractional blending for a Solera is fascinating, really fascinating, because it's less about, there's the element of blending old and young, but it's the use of oxygen and the way they change their wine using oxygen, which I find fascinating. They don't, they're not using oak casks because they're adding flavor. They're not really interested in wood flavor. In fact, most sherries avoid wood at all costs. What they're looking for, and the reason they use casks, is because they're porous and they get oxygen in. So they'll use old wood and spent wood. It's not active wood. In both whiskey and rum, we tend to aim for active wood. We want color and we want sweetness and want sugar. And for that, you need more active wood. So I find all of that quite interesting from both a technical work point of view, but also from the fact that it makes tasty wine.
Yeah.
So there was that aspect. And then the other aspect was we bought some historic sherry butts. So these are butts that were used in a Solera in Spain for around 70 years. A couple of different bodegas. One is Bobadilla, the other one's much smaller, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. And they landed with us, and they were originally destined for a whiskey project that Sekinder wanted to do. you don't, in whiskey and I guess in rum today, you don't use casks from a Solera. It's a misunderstanding that basically the Scotch whisky industry has done to everybody. So they tell you the story of making sherry, and they talk about Soleras, and then they say we use casks, right? And there's this big gap there because what they do is you then go, well, it must be the casks they made the wine with, and the answer to that is no, 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 no. That has never been the case. It would never be the case because a Solera sits there in perpetuity for 70 to 80 years. So it's
right.
Not breaking that down for you. Historically, what you do in all aged spirits where you're using spent wood is you use the cask that's been used for transport, right? So up until the 1980s, a lot of sherry was brought into the UK in wood. It was transported in wood. And so the casks we would be buying would be transport casks. And it's slightly different wood. It's more active because it tends to be younger. And it gives lots of flavor that we want for our spirits. Whether you're looking at rum or you're looking at whiskey, the flavors you guys think of, if you think sherry, you think of chocolate, ginger, spice, right? These are all flavors from wood. If you go and drink a bottle of Oloroso, that's not what you're getting. You're getting dank mushrooms and dryness and, So today, the way we replicate those kind of transport casks is we make wood, right? So you go to a cooper, you buy the wood, it's prepared for you, and then you pay for it to be seasoned with wine for 18 months to 2 years, right?
Interesting.
And that creates a consistent vessel that you can mature in, and it's going to give you all these flavors that people expect of a sherry cask. The only real exception to that is when you're using Pedro Jimenez. Pedro Jimenez is so high in sugar content that it leaves residual sugars on the wood, and that really impacts your spirit. So you tend to get sweeter spirits from those casks.
Yeah.
If you get a cask from a Solera, that wood's all spent. So you're not looking at wood. You will have what's called infill, where the wine has infilled into the wood, but you're probably talking about a dry wine, right? So you're not getting sweetness. You're going to get really that kind of dank earth floor thing, mushroomy thing. Anyway, we bought these casks because we thought it was an interesting project. They turned up at the distillery, and they held around 800 liters of alcohol. Now, for Scotch whiskey, our maximum capacity is 700. We're not allowed to do anything bigger than that. So I was left with this situation with these amazing casks that we couldn't use. And so I phoned up Skinner and said, could I build a Solera for rum? And we'd already had this project where we wanted to see if we could use sherry casks, so seasoned sherry casks that we use in the whiskey industry, from a cooper called Miguel Martin. Fantastic cooper, great wood, with this idea that we'd make this richer style rum. But what I was finding was the rum was really drawing on the wood, and it was good, it was sweet. If you ever come up to see us, I'm more than happy to show people what we make there. But it lacked a depth and an elegance that I felt we needed for Black Tot. And so the thought process in my head was, if I create a Solera, I can use the cask in the same way so that the oxygen will impact on the rum over time. So you leave them slightly empty. And what you do is as you move it through the Solera, you age the rum and give it enough time so you get this kind of dankness and this weight.
Yeah.
And you bring the flavors together. So the idea was to use a Solera in the same way that it's used in Jerez, rather than this idea that it's a big vat that you fill up and empty, because that's not a Solera, right? It's just not. So after that, we built the Solera. We had it all on the floor. And bear in mind, we started this probably in 2019.
Yeah, I was going to ask how long ago it was.
Yeah, because we started using seasoning casks in 2019. That was a really early idea. And we'd had rum in those casks for 18 months before we ended up putting it into the Solera, and then we launched last year. So, and that Solera is still going on. It's still aging, it's still changing, it's still evolving. And we take basically about a third from the Solera layer, the bottom layer, and we put that into bottle. We take a third then from the first Crodera, which is above. We put that into the Solera. We take a third from the second Crodera and put that into the first Crodera. And then we top up the second Crodera with rum that's either been in our seasoned casks or slightly fresher rum that we've not had in the sherry. that blend we're adjusting all the time. So we're adjusting that blend to try and correct for the future. Okay. And eventually we get to a point where it's consistent. Mm-hmm. We'll adjust less. But we've now stacked it. So we bought some racking, we've stacked it up. So it's on 3 layers. The butts are so heavy that the racking, the metal racking is bending.
Might want to fix that before something bad happens.
But for me, it was just an exciting project. We could really celebrate a style of blending, which, as I say, I see Black Tot as a great place where we can really evolve blending in rum. We can really talk about different techniques and different ways of bringing flavor together. And largely, I hope everyone thinks that rum tastes nice. I love it. Obviously, I thought it was brilliant. I had a great joy in showing it to people. I think someone else at the time had asked me, could we do a sugared product? And I said, I did a sugared product for them. I put that in front of them. And they went, oh, yeah, okay. And I went, try this one. And they went, oh, no, that's really good. Like,
yeah. It's funny because I bought this bottle at one of the Whisky Exchange shops, actually, when John and I were in London a few months ago. And you can't see because it's frosted glass, but there's like maybe 1 pour left in there because I've just been I was just saying this on our last episode because we were talking about it, but I said, as long as I've been into rum, people have talked about dessert rums, and usually when they talk about those, they're talking about the Zaccapas, the Diplomaticos, the ones that have additive sugar, things like that. And I've yet to find one of those rums that is actually something I would want to have for dessert. And I was like, this is the first rum I would describe as like a dessert kind of rum that I think is done really well because you took this kind of more natural approach to imparting those kinds of flavors into the rum. But yeah, I mean, I love drinking sherry too. So the influence that you get from that is just kind of right up my alley. But so I'm looking forward. It sounds like this is going to be something that we see another batch or 2 from at some point in the future. So I'm excited for that.
The idea is it's a consistent, ongoing rum. We're not going to batch. We're not going to do the batches. I am absolutely sure, right? Because I have lived in this world of small products for long enough that everyone will figure out where the batch code is on those bottles. And they will be able, when we put it to bottle. And I know there'll probably be a debate on a forum somewhere over which batch code is better. Uh-huh. I know because I've had those debates about other products. And so I know that happens. But the idea is that it's supposed to be continuous. It's like exactly like it is in Spain. The Solera is forever. It's not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a batch process in actually how you do it. But it's supposed to make the same thing over and over again. I will say that it's still young, right? The Solera is still young in my mind.
Right.
The wood we've used is pretty old. I mean, the wood's now probably encroaching on twice my age. They're amazing things. I physically, to touch them is incredible. Like when you start to think about who's worked on this cask, the people who built these casks originally are no longer with us.
That's crazy to think about.
So get that rack fixed soon, then. In that case.
I've been reliably informed it's not bending too much.
Yeah. I did
smiles. Happy rack.
Smile.
I did want to ask, one of the sort of ongoing stories we've seen over the last few years is that there's a lot of rum distilleries that are kind of shifting what they make available to brokers, third parties. You have some distilleries that are no longer selling their aged product, for example, as they work on building out their own brands. Are you seeing much of an impact on the work that you do from that? And do you expect that to impact future blends that you make?
I mean, without talking too much about the detail of all of that, in terms of the probably the commercially bits that are not supposed to. Not good at keeping things to my chest, by the way. Very bad. I don't think it's as much that people are changing how much aged product they're selling. They might be adjusting where they're selling it to or how they're selling it. We're certainly not seeing a reduced amount of stock. We're in a general downturn of alcohol. That's just a fact. So whiskey, it's not just rum. It's a little bit of everything. Some of that's related to over purchasing in a certain period that we don't talk about anymore.
Yep.
But I mean, I listened to a lot of your podcasts through that period, by the way, just
Oh, great.
Towards the end of
we helped get you through it, hopefully.
And I am, much like everyone else, bought far too much beer. I went for an entire time of drinking quantities of Belgian beer for no other reason than, I could get as much rum as I needed. I could get as much whiskey as I needed. Didn't have any Belgian beer. I'll just buy that.
That's always the way of it.
Didn't have to go on the train anymore. So obviously that's had an impact on sales for everybody. And the upshot of that from my side is that a lot of big distillers, I think they were maybe in rum changing their market, as you say, because they were looking at their own brands and market share. So it's kind of a weird time. We're kind of in between two places, and not just in rum, certainly in whiskey, certainly in other aged spirits. We're seeing availability increase, not decrease. I probably bought more aged rum last year than I bought in the previous 2 years. These available were massive. The thing that has changed a bit is availability of brand names, and in terms of talking about product, people are more sensitive about that.
Sure.
Which from our point of view, it can be disappointing because you want to share as much information as possible. But I also understand that people have brand equity and they need to protect that. That can certainly make it more difficult. But again, I think that if you're being respectful, we have some really good relationships. I think we're one of the very few companies who can name Hampton on the back of our label. The reason is that we phoned up and asked, and we were told, we know who you are, we know what you do, we respect what you do, and it's fine. And we've done that across the board. Only one distiller said no. What can you do? So that's probably affecting us more in terms of that kind of brand increase. But availability, no. I mean, I genuinely think we'll probably see availability continue to increase this year. I'm then really hopeful that it'll decrease because rum will pick up, sales will pick up.
Sure.
It's a funny world. You kind of have to, you hope for all these things to happen, which are going to impact you negatively because it's good for everyone else.
Right, yeah.
Knowing full well that it doesn't last forever. So then we'll have a period of glorious purchasing of old rum.
Yeah. So Oliver, every now and then, we like to give free business ideas on our podcast. And the reason they are free is because most of them are awful. But I still wanted to talk about this with you to see, hey, what are your thoughts on it? And get your reaction, which is that Black Tot's position in marketing has always been tied to, the Royal British Navy and obviously the Caribbean, the finest Caribbean. But there are so many other places, as you yourself said earlier, in the world making rum now. So do you think there might be room for maybe a new blended product like, I don't know, a finest South Pacific blend or an Indian Ocean's finest or something along those lines?
Well, the answer to that, John, is really simple. Absolutely. When are you available to come and start working on that with me?
Oh, I'll get on a plane tomorrow. Well, you have the 100 samples ready on the desk, and
that's really not a problem. I mean, getting them on the table is always an issue. It's a lot of time. I've got 2 children, so they work for me. Sorry, we're live, aren't we? We shouldn't be talking about. I absolutely do think. I mean, we are working on little projects all the time of things we'd like to do. We have another rum project on the side, external to Black Tot, that we're hoping will come out at the end of this year, which I'm really looking forward to people seeing. So yeah, there are all these things going on in the background. The difficulty for us is just man hours. We have a really small blending team. So it's myself and then my colleague Andrew Thompson. He mainly works on world whiskey and he does wood procurement. I get to listen to podcasts on rum and whiskey, and he listens to podcasts on wood. I feel
How many wood podcasts are there?
Do you know what? A surprising number.
Really?
There's a Coopers that did an entire series on the science of on wood. And I sat again, I can't believe you sat and listened to that on the journey up to the office. It's like, wow, got 3 hours. Might as well. Got one about extraction.
Check that out, yeah.
So But he has to do the wood procurement side and the filling side. We own not insignificant sized distillery in Scotland. We make about 3.5 million litres of alcohol. We fill from that. I mean, a lot of that goes out the door to blends, but we fill from that about 4,500, 5,000 casks a year. We recask in whiskey somewhere in the region of about 3,000 casks a year. We are about to open Port and Trewin that will create another 2,000 casks a year. So that side of the business is so big and impactful. We end up focusing a lot of our energy there. And then from a product quality and manufacturing side, the way we work today is core products outside of rum, Andrew looks after. So his job is basically to go and make sure we have a recipe. He has to maintain it, which means he has to look at the stock all the time, change the casks if they need changing, make sure that our batches are fairly small. We work on like a 50 cask batch, not a huge quantity. And that's great in some ways because it means your workload's smaller per batch, but it means you've got less places to hide. So if something goes wrong, you've got a big problem. He's got all there. And then I deal with the product creation side, which we bottle around 200 to 300 single casks of whiskey a year.
Wow. So you're handling a lot of that in addition to everything you do with Black Tot.
Yeah, and then we're doing, so we have another rum project. So when that comes out, you'll be like, oh, you're doing that as well. Okay, no problem. Loads of time. And then we've got the ongoing whiskey brands that we do limited editions for and specials and things like that.
Wait, since you said you're so bad at keeping things close to the chest, I have to ask if you can tell us anything about that other rum project now.
So I'm not going to tell you too much, but basically we've been working with lots of different countries that produce rum, right? And sometimes you create blends like my lovely crazy Jamaican rum, which sadly I still can't release because no one's willing to pay £600 for a one-off Jamaican rum blend.
I bet we could find some people.
Yeah, that's what Mitch kept saying. I'll buy it.
Yeah, we'll sell at least 10.
But we've done some interesting over the years. We've done some kind of interesting kind of individual country blends. So we've got a project for that.
Very cool.
Which I'm really looking forward to showing people. It's going to be quite fun to kind of get into that detail. And again, it's away from Black Tot because it's not about global blending. We'll get to celebrate each country separately and talk about what they do.
Yeah,
that would be fun. We have a little sub project for Black Tot in the background that we've literally just started. So that's probably a 2020. I'm hoping a 2026 project. We've pulled samples for it, so it's starting now. But unless I get an email tomorrow that says I listened to the podcast, and no, you need to finish it by October. Get moving.
That's what we're trying. We're trying to use this to create a sense of urgency behind all these.
Yeah, the king to send you, right? Yeah, that's what I need. Urgency. I need more things for tomorrow. So exactly. we've got quite a bit on that side in terms of those project, the kind of creation side. So yeah, we're busy. But that being said, John, I'm on it. Right? If you've asked me. South Pacific style Black Tot. Yeah, next week.
Excellent. Add it to the plate.
Well, speaking of urgency, we do have one last segment for the show that is a tradition known as the rapid fire round. That is masterminded. Oliver, you handle the master blending. John handles the masterminding of the rapid fire segment of the podcast.
Well said.
John, do you want to tell Oliver about that now?
Well, Oliver's a veteran of the podcast, right? He's listened before.
That's
he knows
true.
About the rapid fire, right? Am I right?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I do know. And do you know what? I've listened to it before and gone like, no, it's not fast enough. I'm regretting now. Now I'm thinking, oh no, you need loads of time to think about that.
Yeah, you've been critiquing others' performance, but now it's your turn to step up to the plate.
That's right.
Yeah. Single word on.
We're gonna put our 60 seconds ish on the clock, which Will is the master timekeeper, and he's gonna control that. I'm gonna ask a series of small prompt questions, and you have to give the quickest, most pithy, laconic answers you can to these questions to try to get through as many or all, if we can, in the time limit. So you ready, Oliver? We're gonna do this.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Excellent.
I've got 60 seconds and go.
All right. Neat or on the rocks?
Neat.
Column, pot, or blend?
Blend.
I know that one. Okay. Aged or unaged?
Aged.
Okay. And molasses, cane juice, or maybe cane syrup?
Ooh, cane syrup.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's the second in a row, I think, of that. That's a permanent addition now. All right. The Master Blender series, Reserve series, I should say, the Master Blender MBR, as you called it, is such a big hit. Would you consider maybe releasing a Journeyman's Blender Reserve or an Apprentice Blender's Reserve release?
Only if she'll come and be my apprentice.
That's what John was hoping for. Yeah.
Yes. Wait, I would be the journeyman and Will would be the apprentice.
My bottle will be the cheapest. Yeah.
Exactly. Your favorite rum distillery in the world right now today, Oliver?
Oh, it has to be the Oliver Rum Company because I'm not too far away.
There you go.
Good answer. What tool is the most essential to helping a rum blender be successful?
Bung pull.
What was that?
The bung pull.
The bung pull.
You know what? That makes sense.
John and I did our share of bung pulling at Maine Rum a few months ago. It's trickier than it looks.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
Playing into my time now, Will. Right? Okay. So if
I'm giving you extra time. Don't worry about it.
Excellent. All right, Oliver. You mentioned you majored in philosophy at York University, and I saw that as well as a philosopher myself. What area or specific philosopher do you appreciate, or did you study the most?
You, because he drank whiskey. I don't know any Scottish guy who drinks too much and gets lethargic and thinks about the world and then gets depressed and tries to kill himself.
Good answer.
I relate to all of them.
All right, your favorite person other than Mitch Wilson to share a bottle of rum you love with?
That's actually quite a hard one. Jesus Christ. He seemed like a nice fella. No, he was probably teetotal. He kept drinking wine. Terrible idea. Right, okay. Who's my favorite person to drink rum with? Well, it'll be Sekinder.
Right. Sekinder makes sense.
Think about who signs the checks. Good strategy.
Exactly. Another good answer. You're really nailing these, Oliver. All right. If there were ever, to be another release of Last Consignment type of thing, we thought we could go through some names of what that release might be and how you would name it. So I wanted to see if I could get your reactions to these names. So this is a post Last Consignment release, right? Number one, you tell me if you like it or you don't. How about Oops, we found a bit more?
Yes, love it. Definitely.
How about maybe the Final Flagons?
Final Flagons is too close to what we're doing, so take it back, John.
Oh, okay. How about the last consignment, really, guys, this is it?
Well, I mean, last is almost alliteration, so I'll take it. That's good.
Yeah, I got 3 hits on that, Will, just so you know.
That's pretty good rate.
Keeping score at home. All right, and finally, this has been a long one. Finally, Black Tot's main release is labeled, as we've mentioned, Finest Caribbean Blend. And finest is, of course, the superlative. So that implies that there are other blends out there that maybe weren't quite as good. So, Oliver, tell us, where are the just fine blends and the finer blends?
I told you, we did like 26 iterations of bloody tons of blends. They're sitting in a bank somewhere, different bottles. I don't know if someone else bought them or not.
That's time. We gave you some extra time because, as you pointed out, Oliver, I did cut into your time trying to make my own humorous remarks, which I just love the spotlight. What can I say? But very well done. Well done to both of you on the questions and the answers. Before we let you go, it's been great. Learning so much about everything y'all are doing and everything that's yet to come. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want the rum enthusiast world to know about?
You know what? Probably not that we're doing. I mean, I don't think we're doing anything revolutionary. So I'm not sure I never think anyone learns anything from me anyway.
I'll say at a minimum, everything that you shared about sherry cask aging was a lot of stuff I had never heard before. So that was very cool. So don't sell yourself so short.
I mean, one of the things I have loved is, so I obviously work across mainly 2 categories. And one of the things I've enjoyed immensely is being able to watch the categories work together. So, we use the casks, the seasoned casks for historic Solera. We use those in whiskey production. So sherry casks have had rum in, and they perform incredible things. They make incredible. There's loads of Rumcast stuff happening in whiskey. I'm really looking forward to, over the next few years, we have a wood program for Tormore, which involves us making wood. It's all virgin oak essentially, but it's specially prepared in a particular way to get a specific extract. And one of the things we're now looking at is we've got this really kind of peachy spirit at Tormore. It basically tastes a bit like iced peach tea. It's absolutely amazing. And we've had that in new wood. And one of the projects we're now looking at is how we can use that in rum. So
mix it with the Trinidad that tastes like peaches.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Well,
there you go.
Where we're at, yeah. So
paychecks. I'm waiting for the paycheck to come in the mail.
You can have your paycheck. You have to come across and try the 100 samples, John.
That's true. I got to put the work in.
So yeah, I guess that's the thing I'm enjoying most at the moment. So do watch out for stuff coming both ways.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah, well, I feel like I have a list of like 5 things I need to be watching out for because y'all are up to so many interesting things. But thanks so much for coming on. Really did enjoy it. And yeah, I feel like you and Mitch bring very different perspectives. You're very complimentary, just like elements of a good blend.
Yeah, so that's good. Yeah, he's professional and knows what he's doing.
All right, Oliver. Well, we'll put some links in the show notes where people can check out the Black Tot website. If there's any product that we brought up on the show, you can rest assured that you can go to the website and find all the details that people other than Oliver have put the work into gathering and putting on the website. So thanks so much for hanging out with us. It was really great. We appreciate it.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for the time.
All right, everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. Like we said in the interview, we'll put some links up in the show notes, or I guess just one link to the Black Tot website, and you can kind of find your way around there, get all the deep, nerdy details on the blends if you would like to. And John, I think we've got an exciting announcement coming up in our next episode. Yeah. Anything you want to tease there?
Just to say that, it's been a long road so far with people hanging on with us about the single cask project.
Yeah.
And, we're excited to finally be giving some more concrete information about what's coming. It's a hard thing, Will, to time this, right? Because if we talk about this too early and then people are like, what the heck ever happened to that? Because it takes too long to get to them. So it's been a hard thing for us to hold on to this information long enough to make it seem like we're getting close to the point where we can release it soon and give people that information.
Yeah. We may just be talking about what's actually going into this bottle that I'm showing on the screen right now. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a quick glimpse of the bottles we picked out. But yeah, lots more to come there, but we are going to reveal what that rum is that we are going to be bottling very soon. So very exciting. In the meantime, though, if you have questions, thoughts, reactions to this episode, previous episodes, ideas for future episodes, send us an email, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. Or you can find us on social media. John, where can they find us?
At Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Threads. At the Rumcast is our handle there on all those platforms. And leave a comment. Tell us what's going on with the Ascot Awards. What's your hot take on the Ascot Awards, or cold take, lukewarm take? I don't know.
Take?
Yeah.
No lukewarm takes allowed.
They're great. Is that the lukewarm?
We will spew them from our mouths.
Nice reference.
I thought you'd like that one.
What do you want to know about the single cask release that you really are interested to hear? We're going to try to give all of the nitty-gritty details as best we can with it, of course. But if there's something particular you're interested in hearing about, let us know that too. I think other than that, we've got some interesting interviews still coming. Some new hotness, you might say, with with it. I just had to do it.
You're
again.
one more usage away from it being permanently retired from the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, then I take it back because I don't want to use it there if I'm two away.
I'm just saying, be a little judicious with it in the future. But no, we do have some really cool stuff coming up. I'm excited for it. And yeah, until then though, cheers.
Cheers.